Welcome to our second episode of Lupus Minute. As you know, we will be doing these small little episodes during the course of May for Lupus Awareness Month. Our theme this year is Beyond Lupus. Join us as we look beyond the surface and consider the many different aspects of this complex and often misunderstood condition. Today, we will be talking about the causes of lupus as well as how lupus is diagnosed. Let's get into it. Causes of lupus. Although the definite cause of lupus is unknown, it is believed that the disease is triggered by a combination of genetics and environmental factors, including hormones, certain medications and chemicals, viral and bacterial infections, exposure to UV light, dietary factors, and stress and trauma. Now, let's get into diagnosing lupus. This is probably going to take up most of the video, so put on your thinking caps and really concentrate because this is going to take some thinking. Okay, in 2021, the new classification criteria for diagnosing lupus was published by the EULAR and the American College of Rheumatology. And this is how the diagnosing process goes, because it is a process. Okay, in order to even start the diagnosing process, a person must have a positive ANA blood test result. A positive ANA test is not required to be recent. If you had a positive ANA test in the past, even a year ago, you are still eligible to start the lupus diagnosing process. So let's say you do have a positive ANA blood test result. Doctors will then proceed to apply additional tests as follows. Now stay with me because this can get confusing, but I will do my best to explain it in the best way I can. Okay, but you have to listen, and also I think it is best if you look at the screen while you're listening to this. Okay, the test for diagnosing lupus is broken down into 3 different types of criteria. The first criteria being the entry-level criteria, which I just explained. You have to have a positive ANA result to proceed to the next 2 criterions, which are the second criteria consists of all the clinical domains, and the third criteria consists of all the immunology domains. Don't worry, we're going to break this down for you in just a minute. Okay, so to easily explain this to you, lupus is diagnosed based on a point system. In other words, if you score 10 points or more within the second and third criteria, you would be officially diagnosed with lupus. Okay, so in other words, the more points you score, the more it suggests you have lupus. But if you score 10 points or more, you will be officially diagnosed with lupus. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the different criteria and domains. Okay, in the second criteria, which is all the clinical domains, you have, first up, the constitutional domain, which means systemic, your system, right? And this consists of the fever test. If you have a fever or struggle with fever, then you would score a total of 2 points. Next is the hematologic domain, which means the actual blood itself. And this consists of, first of all, the leukopenia test, meaning low white blood cell count. If this test comes back positive, then you will score a total of 3 points. Okay. Second of all, the thrombocytopenia test, meaning low platelet count. Again, if this test comes back positive, you will score a total of 4 points. Third of all, the autoimmune hemolysis test. I hope I'm saying these words correctly. Meaning low red blood cell count, which is actually a rare disorder where the red blood cells burst. Again, if this test comes back positive, you will score a total of 4 points. So I guess you can now understand how this point system works. Every test that comes back positive, you will score the relative points. Right, next is the neuropsychiatric domain, which refers to the brain and mental processes. This consists of, first of all, the delirium test, which tests whether or not you are aware of your surroundings, scoring 2 points. Second of all, the psychosis test, testing if you are disconnected from reality, scoring you 3 points. Third of all, seizures, meaning if you have uncontrolled electrical activity in your brain, this will score you 5 points. Now already you can see if each one of these tests that I have just mentioned comes back positive, you will officially be diagnosed with lupus, as you would have been scoring 10 or more points at this point. Okay, next is the mucocutaneous domain, which refers to the skin and mucous membranes. Okay, first up we have the test for non-scarring alopecia, which means baldness or loss of hair that does not scar, scoring you 2 points. Second is oral ulcers, but if you have nose ulcers, then that would be seen as the equivalent, scoring you 2 points. Third is subacute cutaneous or discoid lupus. Discoid lupus is skin lupus that can be acute or chronic, which either way would be scoring you 4 points if present. Next up we have the serosal domain, which refers to the outer lining of an organ or the body, consisting of, first of all, the pleural and pericardial tests. Pleural being the fluid buildup around the lungs, then the pericardial being fluid buildup around the heart. So one's the lungs, one's heart. This would score you 5 points. Second of all is the acute pericarditis, meaning the sac around the heart is inflamed. If this is tested positive, this would score you 6 points. Okay, next we have the musculoskeletal domain, which refers to the muscles, bones, tendons, ligaments, joints, and the cartilage. This consists of testing to see if you have any joint involvement. If you do, this would score you 6 points. Next, we have the renal domain. Renal meaning kidney involvement, okay? This domain consists of, first of all, the proteinuria test, which tests for the protein in urine, okay? Then we have the renal biopsy, or in other words, the kidney biopsy. They do a kidney biopsy to test whether you have lupus nephritis. Lupus nephritis is chronic inflammation in the kidneys. Now, lupus nephritis is also broken up into 4 classes, class 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, now listen carefully. If your kidney biopsy comes back positive for lupus nephritis, they will diagnose you according to the 4 different classes. If you have class 2 or 5 lupus nephritis, you will score 8 points. Okay? If you have class 3 or 4 lupus nephritis, you will score 10 points, as the middle classes, being 3 or 4, are considered much worse than the lower or higher classes, which is 2 or 5. Okay? Now that the first batch of criteria is explained, which consists of all the clinical domains, let's look at the second batch of criteria, which consists of all the immunology domains, okay? Immunology referring to the immune system. Okay, so the first immunology domain is antiphospholipid antibody domain. Antiphospholipid antibodies are autoantibodies that attack phospholipid binding proteins, and they can affect the blood by going from liquid to gel, forming blood clots. And we all know what blood clots are. There are 3 types of antiphospholipid antibodies, okay? First one being the anti-cardiolipin antibody. Second one being the anti-beta-2 glycoprotein antibody. And the third one being the lupus anticoagulant antibody. If any one of these antiphospholipid antibodies test positive, you will score 2 points. Next up, we have the complement proteins domain. A complement test may be used to monitor people with an autoimmune disorder to see if treatment for their condition is working. In this domain, you can see that components of the complement test is mostly measured as either C3 or C4. Now, if either C3 or C4 components measures low, that means there is inflammation within the body. And that will score you 3 points. Whereas if both C3 and C4 measures low, that means there is even more inflammation within the body, and this will score you a total of 4 points. Next up, we have the SLE specific antibody domain. Okay, in other words, antibodies of lupus. Okay, there's 2 different SLE specific antibody tests, which includes the anti-dsDNA antibody test and then the anti-Smith antibody test. Let's explain. The antibody dsDNA test is testing for any antibodies on double-stranded DNA, which would suggest you have lupus if you have enough clinical symptoms to go along with it. okay? Whereas the anti-Smith antibody test is a highly specific SLE antibody test. If you get tested positive for either of these tests, remember, you don't have to have both of these tests, but if either one of these tests are positive, you will score a total of 6 points already. Right, now that the doctor has done all these tests, and for example, a few of these different tests came back positive, the doctor will then calculate all the points you've scored, and if the total points are equal to or more than 10 points, you will be officially diagnosed with SLE, which we all know stands for systemic lupus erythematosus. Guys, I tried my absolute best to explain this as easily as possible to understand. And on that note, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Lupus Minute. We will see you next week, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, follow, and sprinkle a little bit of lupus love in the comment section.